you want to start us off?
Well, I guess we just want to talk a little bit about this process that we're seeing a lot. How do you feel about it?
Copy paste. No, obviously this is terrible. You know, I hate that people come and they talk about their personal issues. I've lost my job, I've got people moving in. We've got one later today who has a really long story about sponsorship of his mother and his disabled sister. I don't need to know this stuff. I'm curious because I like to know it, but I don't need to know this, and it should have no bearing whatsoever on our decisions. You know, people have jokingly said that the seniors at Edwards Place next door to City Hall have a very lucrative business in renting themselves out to secondary suite applicants and talking about the need for seniors housing because those always pass. And that's just silly. Today, in fact, you see real inconsistency in our decisions. So, Hawkwood and Royal Oak went down, but Falconridge went through, and I couldn't see any difference in those particular applications. So it really is hugely inconsistent, hugely unfair. One of these days we've got to fix it. The council has shown itself reluctantly, very, very reluctant to actually fix it. 14 of 15 members of council have agreed that the current system doesn't work. One member of council actually likes it, but the others say no, that they cannot agree on what could make it better. So stay tuned. There may be another kick at this before the municipal election.
Is the city seeing an increase in applicants with the downtown economy? I know that was mentioned earlier.
I'm not sure. We certainly have seen a lot of them in the last year or two, whether that is due to a downturn in the economy or whether that is due to just the fact that more and more people are going through the process and we waive the fees and those are now working their way through the process. I can't say.
On the other side of it, the other side of the coin, when they bring up these personal stories, doesn't that also maybe help sell the secondary suite to the others?
It's not supposed to, because legally, when we are looking at these land use amendments, we are only supposed to look at the land use, not the user. That's the same reason why we are not allowed by law to have a bylaw that says the owner has to live there, which I think would alleviate a lot of people's concerns, but we can't do it. Are people actually swayed by these stories? It's hard to say, but I will tell you, the sadder the story, the more likely we are to grab it.
How about a separate meeting for secondary suite applications?
Why would you do that to me? At least this way there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and that light is more meeting. Man, my life is miserable. Anyone else on anything else?
What more are you going to do for Calgary businesses?
Oh, thank you for that. So it's interesting to note that we heard about a lot of people's small business taxes going up and up and up, which they have gone up. I'm not going to deny that. The provincial portion of the property tax is really big, but it was interesting that these advocates didn't point out that there's also a corresponding decrease in the business tax. And when I pointed that out, one of the lobby groups called that disingenuous. I don't think that word means what she thinks it means. It doesn't actually mean true, which is in fact what it was. What was disingenuous is these lobby groups taking the very real concerns of these small businesses and using them as political ammunition when not actually disclosing the true elements of what's really going on. That said, it is very true that these small business property taxes are going up. And the problem is that property tax is a lousy way to fund government from small business because it is not sensitive to whether you've had a good year or not. It's only sensitive to the value of your business, of your building, I should say, on July 1st. That is a terrible way to tax small business. We should have a much more sensitive way to do it that is actually relevant to whether you had a good year or a bad year. And interestingly, the exact same groups that are so mad about the property tax are the exact same ones who oppose any opportunity to change the property tax to a tax system that is more fair. And that's really what this is about. It's about fairness in taxation. Now, my heart breaks for a lot of these businesses, but it is also true that if your business is down 45% year on year, even if you weren't paying any property tax, you'd still be in a very serious problem. So these are the things we've got to address. We have a little bit we can do, not very much on the tax side. Where we have the ability to really make a difference is in helping make sure that these small businesses have customers. And if we slam on the brakes and start laying people off at the city and don't build things, then we will increase unemployment and decrease the number of customers these businesses have. by trying to stimulate the economy as best we can help these businesses on the revenue side, which is actually much, much more useful than what we're trying to do for them on the property tax side.
Would you consider using the city's fiscal stability reserve fund to establish a 2-year tax rebate for small businesses?
Well, I did vote in favor of investigating exactly that. That was soundly defeated by council. In fact, soundly defeated by many of them who are complaining about the business taxes right now. If we are going to dip into the fiscal stability reserve to impact people's tax rates at this time, it has to be in the form of a rebate, not in the form of a permanent reduction to tax, because that just puts us in a really bad position when the one-time money runs out, which coincidentally or not coincidentally would happen right after an election next year. So I think we have to be honest with people and say, if you want us to get the taxes down, then we can either do it through cutting services. And people always say, why do you go to police and fire and transportation first? Because they are the 3 largest departments. And if you exclude those 3 departments, then pretty much you decimate parks, recreation, and everything else. So there are 3 options. Number 1 is you cut services, either across the board or on some particular areas. Number 2, you use one-time money for one-time rebates. Or number 3, you use one-time money for permanent tax reductions, and that is a very, very bad idea.
Is the savings well pretty much dry?
Well, since I've been mayor, with the exception of 2013, the year of the flood, we've actually increased our spending at the city by much less than inflation plus property growth. Inflation plus population growth. So we've been actually cutting in real terms every year since I've been here, and we've been able to do that with relatively minor results on services. Yes, there are more dandelions. I think most people can live with that. We have been very careful on transit hours and so on. So we have been cutting, and we found tens of millions of dollars, some would say more than hundreds of millions of dollars, in efficiencies. And we'll keep doing that. That has to be continuous improvement. But eventually the well runs dry. And certainly you cannot count on those efficiency improvements to save money forever and ever. At the best, you'll get one-time savings.
What are your thoughts on the clash between the Downtown Association and the cycle track?
Oh, I don't know anything about said clash. Say more.
Last week, the Downtown Association kind of was saying that the businesses down there are not seeing an economic or any benefit from this cycle track pilot that is now in front of their businesses, that has stolen some of their parking, but not brought in more customers.
Well, I mean, it's very, very hard. Remember that the Downtown Association has always been opposed to the Stephen Avenue cycle track, which, by the way, has the lowest amount of cycles of all of them. So, it's been a tough time for a lot of downtown business. I think it is very, very hard to isolate the impact of the cycle track on that, which is a drawback that our pilot is happening at this time. That said, we're measuring it very carefully, and we have not seen any evidence that the cycle track is costing any of the business either.
Any other topics on the land?
Thank you. Yesterday, I, as I do most Sundays, spent the day out in the community with people who are doing great things in the community. And I remember being at the ALS walk, and everyone at the walk was wearing a badge that said, "I'm walking for," and they had someone's name there, someone who's been afflicted by the disease. And I said, as I always say, the really special thing about you being here today is not that you're walking for that person, but that you're walking for somebody you don't even know. You're walking for somebody that someday will get a terrifying diagnosis and won't know what to do, and there'll be a community there for them. And to me, that's really what community is all about. And as we struggle to understand this horrific act in Florida, and as we try to talk politics about gun control and Islamophobia and homophobia and all these other issues, I think it's good for us to remember that we live in community, and in community, love always wins, and looking after one another always wins. It's like in the Desiderata, despite its sham and drudgery and broken promises, it's still a beautiful world. And we saw that last night. Spontaneously, downtown groups came together and lit up the downtown in rainbow colors, where hundreds of Calgarians showed up just to show their solidarity with something happening half a continent away. That's love, that's community, and that's what I look to at times like this.